Hi everyone, I'm going to be talking to you today about Uranus moving into Gemini. Now, this is quite a big deal because Uranus has an 84-year orbit, so it hasn't been in Gemini since 1949, and it's going to be moving out of Taurus and into Gemini either on the 25th of April if you live in the US, or the 26th of April in the early hours in the UK, Western Europe, and onwards east. And it's going to stay there until 2033. So this is a big deal, and it's the last of the outer planets to move into a different sign, a new sign, because between November 2024, when Pluto finally moved into Aquarius, then we had Saturn Neptune early in the year moving into Aries, and now the final outer planet, Uranus, moving from Taurus into Gemini. And that completes the outer planet shift. So there's a big shift in energy, we'll feel, moving from slow, heavy, dense water and earth into air and fire, which are very quick and very dynamic, as well as it being the year of the fire horse, as well as this being in a huge stellium of Aries energy as well. Now, until it moves into Gemini, Uranus is right at from the 6th of April all the way through to the 25th, 26th. It is at the anoretic degree, the very last degree of Taurus. And often that degree has a kind of urgency or extreme expression around the symbolism of the sign. You know, if we look back to the 11th of March 2011, the Fukushima disaster, Uranus was right at the final whisper. It was within about 3 degrees of moving from Pisces into Aries. And at the same time, Neptune was at the anoretic degree, the very last few minutes of Aquarius, moving into Pisces. So they were in each other's signs, which is called mutual reception, which strengthens that even more because it suggests that they are in conjunction. And what happened then, as we know, there was a 9+ magnitude earthquake, Uranus, planet of earthquakes, and that caused huge meltdown in the nuclear reactors. Uranus, think of uranium, nuclear reactors, and a lot of radioactive pollution in the water. Neptune, water, Pisces, water in the seas. And so the symbolism was very, very clear then. So hopefully it won't be quite so dramatic, but the Taurus is linked to, again, fixed Earth. It could be more seismic activity we'll see around this time. I mean, April is very hyped up, intense energy, as I've spoken about, and many other astrologers are talking about as well. But that it could be something Earth-based, seismic activity, earthquakes, volcanoes. It could be something to do with the banking system, finance, because Taurus is also linked to that. It also could be agriculture, food, and resources, you know, thinking of food, because also if the current situation with the blockages in the Straits of Hormuz, it's not only blocking oil. Remember, Neptune is linked to oil. That's still on the world axis, throwing oil onto the public stage in a big way, but it's also blocking fertilizers to help food growth. So all of this is expressing very, very clearly, symbolically. Now, I filmed a video about 9 months ago because Uranus did move into Gemini for a period of the middle months of last year. So I'm going to put that video below so I won't repeat myself. And it's got a lot of detailed information in there, going back to previous cycles of Uranus in Gemini to give you a much clearer idea of how this may manifest this time around. And I don't want to go through all that old ground again, but I recommend you have a listen to that. So all the outer planets, as I say, are at the beginning of their new cycle. So Saturn will stay in Aries until April 2028. Neptune will stay in Aries until 2039. Uranus, as I say, moving into Gemini, will stay there till 2033. And Pluto, which moved into Aquarius fully, as I said, in November 24, will stay there until January 2044. So these are long periods of time. And I absolutely believe that this is the beginning of a new paradigm for humanity. We are in this crucible of change because of all the other bigger cycles I've talked about, the unique astrological configuration I've talked so much about. I'll put the link for that video below, the big picture. Big, long cycles, medium cycles, shorter cycles were all cascading down into this real crucible of change and shift and transformation. This year it settles, I believe, a little bit more next year, and we're going to see a lot more evidence, a lot more green shoots of new Earth, but they're all over the place. You just have to be on that frequency to see them manifesting. But this is about embodiment. This whole thing, whatever I'm talking about, the planets out there, this whole thing, as always, is an inside job. These are inner frequency shifts, but we have the illusion that they're manifesting in our outer reality. So, this idea of the work being inner is absolutely crucial to everything I'm going to be saying. So, very big change in energy. I believe this is actually linked to a rewiring of our brains. And the reason I say that is Gemini is very linked to our neural networks, our thinking processes, and Uranus is the planet of electricity. So it's like there's a new electrical wiring just beginning to take place as Uranus enters Gemini. And so that is incredibly exciting. It would be very easy to get overstimulated at this time. There's going to be so much happening, apparently, in our outer world. We can see it already. A lot of big news, a lot of events, but also even on social media, it's a blizzard. So really try not to get caught up in the blizzard. You can observe, but pull back. It's very easy to get caught into doom scrolling and, down the what's it called, the scroll hole, as Tim Wilde beautifully said. So keep coming back. Make your inner focus your default position rather than constantly looking at news, social media, because they're going to be very colourful and very dramatic, but they're going to be an awful lot of zigzags, yes, no, here, gone, is he a good guy, is he a bad, it's going to be absolutely exhausting. So save your energy for your evolution, much better use of it. So this is about new perspectives that we're going to have, I think, new perspectives. And it's like all of our lives, we've been living behind a slightly muddy window. And then all of a sudden, both with all this Aries energy and with Uranus moving into Gemini, we get a much greater sense of piercing clarity. We can see clearly. Yes, there's going to be all kinds of muddledom with AI. Is it real? Is it not? But if you turn your attention away from that to your intuition, it's going to be we're going to be able to intuit very clearly. It's going to be piercing truth. Some of those truths are going to be uncomfortable. Some are going to be very welcome, but big time of revelation. So a new perspective and a much bigger, broader perspective, much bigger. It's like we've been just living on this narrow tram track, but all of a sudden it's like you've been living in a small dark house your whole life. And this is the day that you actually step out. And it's just the beginning. Remember, we've got a long way to go, but we're at the beginning of this upshift, this major upgrade for humanity, when for the very first time you step out of the house into the sunshine and you see the trees and the sky and the birds and all the beautiful flowers. It's that kind of a quantum shift that I think we're gonna see. And so it's going to be, because Gemini is multidimensional. Well, it's mutable air. So I keep getting this image of somebody blowing a dandelion head with all of the spores, and the spores go in every direction. You know, it's mutable air. It's divergent energy. So this is it's like when you shine light through a prism and it splits. It's that kind of image, but it's invisible. It's, you know, so this is going to open us up to our different clairs, multidimensionality. We may be, as we move through this over the months and years, remember, you know, just the beginning, we've got a lot to come. We may be talking to trees, we may be communicating with elementals, we may be having a conversation with the plants, we could be sharing time with our galactic family. You know, it could be that big, and we're all going to be at different points at different times. And don't judge, you know, think that you're in a yoga class, you run your own race. You don't judge your progress. In fact, you don't judge your progress at all, really, because it's judgment by how anybody else is doing. We're all on our own soul's journey. But there will be this feeling of expansion for sure. This big, big feeling of expansion and a vast paradigm. And this is going to change our patterns of thinking. I believe that ultimately we will, our inner system is turning into what I want to call a heart-mind system. You know, we've been so dominated by our brains and our intellect and the information age. Now the shift is to the heart. The heart is going to be our navigation tool in terms of intuiting, feeling other people's energy, feeling the energy in a room or a circumstance, you know, just tuning in as to whether that particular event is right for you, etc., etc. So the mind is going to be subservient to the heart as the time goes on, rather than dominant. And try and kind of step into that already. So you're living into it from your intuition and your heart. And what really helps, Uranus is very much connected to being in the moment, right now, not fretting about the past, not worrying about the future, in the moment. And you can often feel those states if you paint or you draw, or you're listening to music, or you write poetry, or you're candle gazing, or you're meditating. You know, you're just in no time. You drop into no time. And that's what I mean by just being in the moment, in the present. You know, think of Eckhart Tolle's brilliant book, The Power of Now. And that's where the only place your power really lies, in the now. And I can get it in nature. You know, I can get it in nature just going to one of my favorite beech trees and connecting with him or her or whatever, and just feeling I'm in the moment in this connection. So that's what you want to cultivate, and that will get us off this kind of linear time. But together, what's helping the clarity is the stellium in Aries, this lineup in Aries, because that is also to do with independence, sovereignty, self-sufficiency, being a pioneer, taking a risk. And of course, Uranus is the maverick, the outsider, the one who doesn't fit, the one who wants to break the rules, break up the status quo. Because when we have strong periods of Uranus, it is always about wanting more freedom, a greater shift to freedom, because Uranus is the planet of freedom. There's a revolutionary, rebellious urge that comes up with Uranus. I want to be free. I want to be my own person. I don't want to obey the rules. I want to follow my absolute truth and authenticity in terms of who I am. And so you may be having, you know, very strong feelings in that area as well. And they will be right on time as well. So let's take a quick look at the chart for the Aries ingress. And ingress just means when the planet is entering a new sign. I won't spend long on this, but I did want to share it with you because these moments are actually quite important. Okay, so this is happening in the UK. It's happening very early. We are now in British summertime, so that's actually 1:52 on the clock, almost 2 a.m. And adjust for your own time zone. So ignore the clock face, ignore the houses. We're just looking at where the planets fall and their aspects to each other. And so here we see that Uranus is just 00, has just entered Gemini, and I'll come back to that very important point because that's what we're here to talk about. But just a couple of other things I want to pick up. And as I say, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I'm covering the prevailing astrology and other updates. It's interesting here that Mars is in its own sign, very dynamic in Aries. Try and align yourself with divine will with this rather than primal, instinctive, reactive will. Try and raise it to have a spiritual focus. It is conjunct Salacia, and I think we are going to discover so much about water. I think water is going to be on our public stage in a much bigger way, partly thanks to Veda Austin's beautiful work and, of course, Randy Hatton, who I spoke to recently too. So this is going to really energize this sense of sovereignty, independence, all those things I've just talked about. Do something new. Take action to do something new that is very likely to have a creative or spiritual context to it, whatever that is. Could be something you've never done before. But see where Aries as a sign falls in your chart, and that will give you a good clue. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to the link below, you get a 2-part video series that you can watch forever that takes you from 0 to where to find these points in your chart and what it means for you. And you can use that for every update I ever do. It's not a birth chart analysis. These are teaching videos. But looking at where the sign Aries falls in your chart will give you a good idea of how this might manifest. And Aries, when it's moving through any house, it energizes the affairs of that house. So 4th house, there's going to be an awful lot going on in your home. It could be redecorating, rebuilding, a lot happening there. 5th house, that's highly creative. 6th house, that's your work and your health, etc., etc. The videos cover all that. Now, with all of this dynamic, fast, very kind of quick-fire energy, it does help that the sun has now moved into Taurus. Taurus fixed Earth, and that does help to bring in more stability. And we're now moving into Taurus season, of course, so more on that in my upcoming updates. But we also have here Jupiter square to Mercury, and this is wonderful in terms of big plans, future visions, where we may want to live. Cancer, who are future family. Cancer it may not be our biological family, it may be, it may not. And how to feel more emotionally secure, Cancer, than we may have felt in the past. This can also blow up the news in a bigger way, blow up information and facts in a bigger way. Now, I've talked at length in a recent update about Eris and Chiron. So just the other thing to note here is Jupiter is semi-square to Uranus. So as Uranus enters Gemini, there could be some shock or surprise for many people that can feel a little bit destabilizing, because Taurus is, the sun in Taurus here is the only Earth we have here, the only planet in Earth. So let the old fall away. We can see corruption writ large everywhere, right on time for the astrology. Been expecting that, talking about that for the last 18 months at least. Let it all go. Let the old systems crumble. Try not to give it your attention, because your energy is actually life support. And we don't want that kind of system. I think virtually nobody would want that kind of system to continue. We want to birth something much more loving, compassionate, and abundant for all. So turn your focus to what you want to create. Just to point out, the moon is at the anoretic degree here of Leo, 2953. It's quite interesting that this is just 4 minutes away from the US president's ascendant. It's also conjunct Regulus in his chart, which is conjunct his ascendant. So this is his identity in the world. So in some way, again, and this came up in the recent update I did, this ingress of Uranus into Gemini is shining a light on his identity in the world, his projection in the world, and also Regulus is to do with kingship or assumption of kinship. Leo can be very much the sign of leadership, but it's very important that there is heart in that leadership, that it isn't just egomania, which is the shadow side of Leo. You know, I've arrived, we can start now. It's the classic t-shirt for Leo. So here, moving from Taurus to Gemini, very different energy. You know, Taurus wants to take things slowly. It is fixed earth. It's very cautious. It doesn't like sudden change imposed on it. Gemini loves change, loves variety. This is the sign of choice. And I do believe this month, April, I'm filming in April 2026, that we are in the midst of, or about to be in the midst of, quite a significant, a very significant dimensional shift. These will continue through the year like branches and smaller branches coming from a tree, but you will self-select which timeline you are on by your frequency. If you're spending a lot of time in fear and anger and polarization, you are going to see more of that in your reality going forwards. That's not a judgment or an instruction or moral superiority. It's just you get more of what you think about all day long. It's that simple. The universe is just a mirror. So that would lead you on a timeline where there's potentially more war, more technology. It can feel more controlling or more synthetic. If you can really focus on love, then that would lead you in this dimensional split to something more inclusive, more organic, more community-based, which is beautiful. Now, ultimately, we all come back together to unity consciousness. I can't possibly tell you when that's going to happen because that's down to the collective consciousness of us all. The other thing so be acutely aware, more aware than you've ever been of the choices you're making, the thoughts you're thinking, the feelings you're feeling day to day. You know, really be on it, as it were, in a much more conscious way. It's so important because, you know, we are the bridge building generation. All these massive shifts are happening, and we're going to look back at these times as absolutely historic. So make sure that every choice you make, and we can all slip, of course we can, you know, we're human. But, you know, think of that blank canvas that I've talked about so many times. We are now putting layers of paint on the canvas. What are those layers of paint? Are they based on love or are they based on fear? Now we have an important yod here, which I hope you can see. It's between Uranus, and this is really coming into sign now, actually, because Uranus has been out of sign for this quincunx at the end of Taurus. But Uranus, 150 degrees from Homer, 3 degrees of Scorpio, and Neptune, 150 degrees from Homer as well, at 3 of Aries, 3 of Scorpio. So this is very interesting, and this will sit there for really the rest of this year. So the sextile between Uranus and Neptune, the conjunction, as I've mentioned recently, was in 1993, and that was really the beginning of the internet technology going viral, Neptune. So for sure, we are going to see major leaps in technology. I think that's, you know, super obvious to see. doesn't need me to tell you that. But also, this can be very mystical. A combination of Uranus and Neptune can be that you're experiencing dimensions of reality you never even thought existed. You're shifting dimensions. This is back to our multi-dimensionality. I think there are going to be many new discoveries, Uranus about water and all of its forms, all of its different expressions of consciousness, Neptune. I'm going to come back to that theme when I start to talk about the conjunction here to Sedna. Sedna is, Homer, remember, is the Hawaiian goddess of fertility, birthing babies from all over her body. In her fire goddess aspect, she was said to birth the 8 islands of Hawaii. Look at the amount of volcanic activity we have all over the world right now. Super active volcanic activity. We've had some very big earthquakes as well. That's Uranus. We've had 3 7+ magnitude earthquakes in the last few days, and particularly around the kind of ring of fire. It's been very active. The Pacific Asian ring around there, Indonesia, Philippines around there. I also feel that we are going to, with this conjunction to Sedna, then now this becomes exact with Uranus at the end of May. But even now, this is bringing a whole new wave of awakening. And remember the myth of Sedna. And, when I first started to talk about the myth of Sedna, people say, oh, well, that's just, it's just so abstract. How can it possibly have any meaning for today? Well, I think it has a huge amount of meaning for today. You'll have heard me talk about it. It's very easy to find online. But essentially, when Sedna was forced to let go of the boat, the tangible security, the only tangible security she knew, as her father was chopping off her fingers with the oar so he could save himself in the storm, and she floated down to the deep, and her fingers became beautiful new sea creatures of seals and whales, turtles. That was a complete metamorphosis and transmutation. And that's essentially what Sedna represents here. We are going through a biological shift, not just a mental one. This is deeply rooted in our physicality, because we've never made this kind of evolutionary jump in our physicality, in our bodies before. But I think it's fascinating. So very much about a big, big wave of awakening, I think could happen around about this time, late April. I think there could be another one in late May when Uranus becomes exact to Sedna. Remember, Uranus is the planet of awakening, clarity, truth. But also, and they're going to go, through waves, and Dr. David Clements has talked about this, a whole series of waves this year. And we are ascending with Gaia. She is going through her own rebirth. That's what all the seismic activity is about. And we are kind of in step. We are in symbiosis with her. But I think what could also be discovered, and I've kind of mentioned this before, Sedna floated down, way, way down to the deep, icy Arctic wastes, if you like, seas. And so after the trauma with the betrayal by the patriarchy from her father, chopping off her fingers, didn't care whether she lived or died to save himself, service to self. After that trauma, as she floats down to the deep and becomes a sea goddess, she experiences profound peace and stillness. And if any of you have ever gone diving, you know that overwhelming silence that you get, deep, deep down. It's just deafening silence, and it's beautiful. So this is calling us back after trauma to find deep peace, stillness, silence. Those are your go-tos when we move through this very overstimulated, jazzed up period. But I also think we are going to discover new sea life, new sea creatures, new sea plant food. And I've talked about this before when it was last year they discovered a gigantic mountain range, an underwater mountain range off the coast of Chile that they hadn't even realized was there. And when they discovered it, they discovered all kinds of new ecosystems with new plant life that they never knew had existed before. So this is what we're going to see. Uranus is the planet of discovery in the seas, the deep seas, sextile to Neptune, conjunct Sedna. So that's going to be, I think, really thrilling. I also think Uranus in Gemini, because it's to do with our mind. And remember, Uranus is now in an in-sign trine to Pluto in Aquarius, ruled by Uranus. Both these air signs are to do with our mind. Gemini is very much our neural network. And I think we are going to have a huge wave of the science of consciousness. Better understanding of the science of consciousness, which is going to be absolutely fascinating. Uranus is the planet of, as I say, the outsider, the maverick, and the galactics. So for sure, I think, this is literal translation of the symbolism. We are going to have more galactic communication, Gemini, more galactic connection, more, I think, even galactic languages, because Gemini is to do with languages. Light language, many of us are aware of, that just happens spontaneously. We don't have to go to classes and study the grammar. It's just a kind of download. There will be more of those, and I think different galactic languages. I think there's going to be a lot of disclosure as we move forwards in these next few months about our galactic family. And really, they have looked after us for a very, very long time. And I think that's going to be an extraordinary leap in consciousness, as well as the rewiring of our brains and, the opening up of our multidimensionality. We are entering extraordinary times. The biggest thing is stay grounded, because there's going to be so much happening up here and out there, apparently, although it's all in here. Stay grounded. Bare feet on the grass, bare feet on the earth. Keep connecting. Do things like breath work, tai chi, qigong, yoga, breathing and activity that is also grounding. Eat root vegetables, potatoes, parsnips, that's grounding as well. But the simplest and easiest and best thing of the lot, particularly if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and coming into spring, thank goodness, after that winter, is bare feet on the grass. Just feel that connection. This is also very revolutionary energy, even more so than when Uranus was in Taurus, because Gemini is the sign of non-conformism. Never wants to conform, wants to step back and observe and people watch, doesn't want to fit into any particular category because it's mutable, wants to move around, not be too defined. Another literal expression of this is freedom in your everyday life. Gemini is our everyday life. Freedom of speech. Uranus is freedom, Gemini is speech. Freedom of writing in social media, for instance. It's very interesting, and credit to the brilliant astrologer Frank Clifford for reminding us that 1984 was published, I think it was the very last day of Uranus in Gemini. That's really interesting, because that, of course, had been a lot of wartime up to then too. But there's a much stronger sense of sovereignty. I'm going to do my own thing, rebellious and revolutionary behavior. And remember, starting last August 2025, we entered 10 years of Pluto out of bounds to the south. That amazing, amazing, vast piece of very detailed research that US astrologer Rosie Finn did. I had a conversation with her on my channel. I'll put the link for that below. Extraordinary 20 years of research going back almost 4,000 years. And she found that when Pluto is out of bounds to the south, and we're in that 10-year run now, the power starts to shift back to the people in a very revolutionary way. For instance, 1789, French Revolution, the American Revolution, all of that, was Pluto out of bounds to the south. So Uranus moving into Gemini is about more freedom, more day-to-day freedom. I think, and again, this is historically true. If you listen to my previous Uranus in Gemini video, you'll hear me talking about all the developments in aviation, because Uranus was the sky god. So big, big, big developments in aviation from this point on over the next 7 years. Flying is going to be faster. It's going to be, the vehicles are going to be faster. They're going to be lighter. Certainly flying cars are becoming available. There's a car called the Aleph, A-L-E-F, made by Aleph Aeronautics. And they have something called a Model A, which is all about city transport. Gemini represents cities. And again, Uranus flying, it's very easy to see in that it has a vertical takeoff and landing. It doesn't have too far a distance before it needs recharging, electrical, but it's for city transport, local city transport. I mean, it's so literal. And also in terms of transport, at a previous Uranus in Gemini transit in 1863, and that transit of Uranus through Gemini was 1859 to 1865. So in 1863, it was the very beginning of the London Underground, which is so famous. So quick city transport. Uranus is always to do with quick city transport. Already, certainly in China, and it's developing in Japan and South Korea, they are using what are called maglev trains, M-A-G-L-E-V, and L-E-V rather, and that literally means magnetic levitation. And the one in China, I think, is the fastest passenger train in the world at 375 miles an hour. Extremely fast, extremely quiet. And again, this is air, isn't it? It's quiet, it's not loud and noisy. But it works on a process of repelling magnetism. So the trains actually travel 4 inches above the ground. Think of air. They're in the air, which of course reduces the resistance of being right on the ground, and extraordinary. So these are spreading across the world, and this is, a whole new episode for that kind of fast travel. Communication, for sure. Previous, I think I can actually stop sharing here. Yeah, I can probably stop sharing here and just talk to you. Yeah, so communication, if you go back to previous Gemini, Uranus and Gemini cycles, we had the development of the printing press. We had the first newspaper appearing in Germany in, I think that was 1609. And Gutenberg invented the first printing press. And the written word became a means by which revolution could be formed across geographies, because now there was a method of communication that was kind of beyond the Pony Express that they had in America. And so the written word became an instrument of revolution. Remember that Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. Mercury, very much about day-to-day communication. Uranus always upgrades. Uranus always upgrades. Development of the internet, as I said, around about 1993, that was the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Technology goes viral. And in 2011, the Arab Spring, and this was a square between Uranus and Pluto, but Uranus was very highlighted here. The Arab Spring was organized via social media, because young people could communicate via, Twitter, X, whatever, Instagram, to organize their social protests, which brought down fossilized governments, been there for decades, in days because it undercut the normal oversight of those governments. So this is the kind of thing, using social media in a very clever way. Of course, this is going to be an explosion in AI. Of course, it's absolutely exponential. Isn't it interesting that Google have called their AI Gemini? Can't make it up. I do think, however, there's going to be an explosion in independent journalism, independent Uranus journalism, writing, Gemini, much more than we've seen in recent years when everything has been so constrained. I believe we're going to have different internets, different social media platforms that are censorship free. Censorship free. That will be a big deal, particularly with that echo of 1984. So yes, opening up of our multidimensionality, communication with many different life forms, plants, trees, animals, galactic beings, all of it. It will be immensely exciting. It will be a whole different era for humanity that we've never experienced before. Most of us haven't experienced before up to this point. Uranus, I believe, is also very connected to light. And part of the reason I think that, one of the last times that Uranus was in Gemini, the Dutch scientist Huygens, Huygens, in 1690, discovered that light could be a wave and a particle. And I think we are going to discover an enormous amount about light, not just that water is condensed light, as Veda so beautifully says, but really understanding the different spectrums of light, the importance of natural sunlight for our health. I'm going to have to move country, I think, for that one. Natural sunlight is immensely important in ways that we, may not have been fully cognizant of before. I think we are actually embodying a new geometry of light, a new geometry of light. So the other area that I think will grow a lot, and oh, by the way, yes, just remember that Uranus currently is semi-square to Salacia in that chart I just showed you. So Salacia is linked to the shimmering sunlight, moonlight on the seas. I think she's very linked to this high-frequency light, which we're experiencing right now. So discoveries about light. So yes, I do believe we're embodying a new frequency of light, which is changing our internal structure from carbon to crystalline. And that's why a lot of us are experiencing symptoms. We're extremely tired. We all know that. I think breath work will become a much wider practice because Gemini rules the lungs. In a previous transit of Uranus through Gemini, Jacques Cousteau invented the aqua lung. So it rules the lungs. So I think breath work as a way to master your mind, master your frequency, and also really achieve altered states. Breath work will become a much bigger deal because you've always got it with you. It's all for free. It travels with you. And there's a particular practice which was used very widely by the yogis, which is holding on the exhale. And a professor, he's passed away now some years ago, called Professor Buteyko, he developed a whole breathwork protocol holding on the exhale. And he helped many people cure their asthma by doing that. The Indian yogis, they said that they developed their magical powers, their siddhis, as they called them, by holding longer and longer on the exhale. I practice Soma breath every day, and you can find his website very easily. And he's Niraj also he's a brilliant musician. He also has a YouTube channel, so you can start investigating some of his breathwork practices there. But breathwork in order to change our frequency, our mental state, and even develop some altered states in a very magical way. I think that will become much more widespread. huge number of new healing technologies. Huge. They're popping up all over the place. New ideas, innovations. We will really, really, really get, and I've said this several times before, that energy and frequency underpin everything. Everything is energy and frequency. Everything. It always has been. We just haven't fully realized that. But we're going to be able to sense it, see it, sense it, feel it in a much bigger way. And really remember, turn inwards, find stillness, find peace, find calm. Because that is one of the greatest gifts we can give to the collective to help people in horrendous situations currently. War, poverty, hunger, horrendous. The fastest way we can help them is to actually energetically shift the collective consciousness. And we know that that can shift in a very short time, minutes. I mean, look at Lynn McTaggart's site about evidence. There's so much research about this. Joe Dispenza's work is extraordinary. Greg Braden's work, Heart Math Institute. There's 10 tons of it out there. So the fastest way we can efficiently shift the collective consciousness to help our brothers and sisters who are suffering is to master our frequency, because what frequency you're broadcasting, your reality is assembling itself around that frequency. Your reality is your barometer of how you're doing with that. And clearly, if you're living in a war zone, that's not going to be great. And so we have to up our game to help our brothers and sisters. So with all of this kind of very fast, dynamic energy that's very overstimulated, very hyped, it's very easy for your nervous system to be frazzled. Strongly suggest that, as well as grounding, you spend more time in nature in general. I go out on a morning walk in ancient woodland, non-negotiable in any weather. I said that often. Thank the sun as it comes up every day. Particularly if you live in the UK, I'm thrilled. Send love to the trees. Every glass of water you drink, bless it and send love to it. So as you move through your days, thanking the sun, sending love to the trees, love to the animals, love to the plants, blessing your water, you'll find that in that sort of constant stream of gratitude and love for large parts of the day, you are in a state of grace, of joy, of bliss, almost a sacred state, I want to say, of divinity. And I'm really, really trying to be conscious of doing this myself. I mean, I can easily drop into this in nature. Just, usually walking on my own with my neighbour's dog, who I love to bits. But just really feel that, particularly spring here now, that everything is electrical. It's coming to life, new life forming, and have a sense of the sacred, rebirth, a sense of divinity in everything you see, in everything you consume, everything you connect with. This is a time of really, really getting back in touch with the earth. And I think that Yod to Homir is about that too. Homir's symbolism is really about regeneration, not just the new land masses coming up potentially, but regenerating ourselves internally, biologically. I absolutely think that's happening. And also things like regenerative farming. And I've mentioned before, I think Homir in Scorpio is very linked to stem cell medicine with your own individual stem cells, nobody else's. So really try and cultivate that Zen beginner's mind. If you're in nature, can you imagine it's the very first time you've seen an oak tree? It's the very first time you've heard a bird sing. I was doing that this morning. It's really beautiful because it's just so simple and joyful and in the moment, Uranus, in the moment. Because we are absolutely the bridge builders right now. Couldn't be more important. So just allow the old systems to collapse under their own corruption. I think we're seeing that incredibly loudly and noisily and clearly. Just let it all go. Focus on what you want to create. And we are creating these stepping stones of light. I know we are, because there's so many people having experiences with a meditation that I initiated, but with many people's meditations, that they're experiencing these heightened moments of bliss and oneness that are much bigger for them than they've ever known before. So we are actually collectively birthing a whole new way of being, and really feel excited about that. Throw yourself into it. Focus on creation, focus on love, focus on peace, focus on stillness, focus on compassion, gratitude, all of those things. And even by the end of this year, I think so much will have changed in the world. So much will have changed for each of us personally, and we'll be able to look back with pride and say, hashtag, look what love built. God bless. I hope that's helped you. Bye for now, and be back soon with another update. Don't forget to watch the other video on Uranus and Gemini, because that could be pretty helpful as well. God bless. Bye for now.